Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony LaMontagne, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zagi Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Banshee, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we're regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How did Joelle?
I'm okay. I had an interesting experience with my son in the car yesterday. He's been listening to the soundtrack for the latest Trolls movie.
Again.
And Trolls 3 this one.
Yeah, but he loves Trolls too.
He does, yeah. So he started singing me this fantastic song that he found on the soundtrack. And it was Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics.
Okay.
Yeah. So he got through the first few verses and then I carried on. He was like, "What song?"
It's a movie, Mum.
Yeah. So today he asked if we could listen to the original in the car, which he said that he thought it was okay.
Okay. So it's still all right all these years later.
It is still all right. It's still a banger, Jason.
It is a banger. That's for sure. Yeah. That's good. It's good that you guys can share that love of music. Can he sing like you?
No.
Poor kid.
He's 10. I don't know how well I could sing when I was 10.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah. Has he got an interest in performance?
Generally, I think more like creative stuff. So more kind of drawing, animating, game design, that kind of stuff. He's got a bit of a fear of being on stage in front of people, as plenty of people do.
But you're an introvert that doesn't mind belting out some tunes on a stage.
Yeah, but I don't have a fear of public speaking. That's different to being an introvert.
True.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another day.
Yeah. Don't conflate your concepts, Jason.
Yeah. I'm good at that.
No.
Stick to your strengths is what you tell me.
So carry on conflating concepts because you're good at it.
Yeah. Why not?
That's one way to interpret stick to your strengths. Sure.
Cool. Well, our guests have been patiently waiting. And
we've got two.
It's plural.
Yes.
Yeah. So we should probably let them in. So one is a corporate lawyer with expertise in foreign affairs and human rights policy. The other has spent the last 15 years working as an inspector with the WHS regulator. They are here today to talk about their work in the SafeWork New South Wales Respect at Work Taskforce. Welcome to the podcast, Christina Hey-Nguyen and Alexandra Rowe.
Alexandra? You said, well, apart from the eggs part, you then said Alexander.
Alex Rowe, or Rowie, as we like to call her.
That works for me. Love it.
So yeah, you messed up the wrong name.
Yeah, see, this is what happens. Like, I should not even practice beforehand. I will butcher the names anyway, Joelle.
Yeah, I know.
I really apologize to all of our guests, not just the ladies that we have on today, for butchering people's names. It's I don't know. It's a disability. It's not a well-known disability. I think I'm neurodiverse that way.
With names.
Yeah, can't pronounce names properly.
Sure.
It's a niche.
I think you just got the yips.
All up in my own head.
You did. You got into your own head.
Yeah. Enjoy.
All right.
Get us back on track.
Let's go. Okay. So first question that we always ask our guests is, what are your favorite podcasts? So maybe we'll just go like what's one from each of you, maybe starting with Christina.
I'm Christina Hey-Nguyen. I'm the head of the new Respect at Work Taskforce at SafeWork New South Wales, focused on workplace sexual harassment prevention. SafeWork New South Wales is the work health and safety regulator across New South Wales workplaces. I am a huge podcast fan, and of course, in addition to listening to this podcast, I find it really hard to choose just one, but I listen pretty regularly to The Squiz and 7am, which is done by the Saturday paper. They're across the latest news and politics. And I really love Chat 10 Looks Through, which is a podcast done by author and journalists Annabelle Crabb and Lee Sales. It's incredibly funny and sarcastic, and it delves into the latest music, books, podcasts, theatre, musicals, and it's just a really fun time.
That's kind of something that we would like to
Yeah,
listen to.
sarcastic and funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of top of my list for things to look for. Very good. What about you, Alex?
I suppose for me, I'm not a huge podcast person. I've listened to this one for a long time, but I like a little bit of optimism, I think it is, from Simon Sinek. Just gives me a different spin on the world, which can be a very sad place at times, but I like to look for the positive in people.
Yeah, Happiness Labs is a good one for that as well. All right. So professional careers, maybe just the elevator pitch. And Alex, we might start with you for that one.
Oh, so with me, long time ago, started in cancer research, investigating different things. Moved into safety, got the safety bug, and I've been with SafeWork now 16 years. Most of that time in the psychosocial space, which is challenging and interesting. And here I am in Respect at Work now at SafeWork New South Wales, leading a team of specialist inspectors.
That was an elevator pitch. Well done. And Christina, what about you?
Sure. I started out as a commercial litigator and a corporate lawyer, and then moved across to government and worked on a whole range of public policy issues, foreign policy, human rights, refugee work, gender work, and lived overseas as a diplomat in Cambodia and the Netherlands. And right before joining SafeWork was at the Human Rights Commission.
Now, Christina, I've met you in person, and you're not exactly tall in stature. How did you feel like bumping around the Netherlands, where 6'4", like my height, is kind of average height?
I know, like I'm extremely short, and I was in the land of giants. Yeah, everyone's so tall. I actually couldn't find a bike to fit me, so I had to get a kid's bike.
Yeah,
and that was fine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jason's a little bit obsessed with short people.
No, when Christina comes to our conference, you guys are standing back.
This is like his thing. As soon as there's anybody who's kind of short, he makes me stand back to back with them so that he can take a photo and see who's taller.
Yeah, we had Joe Grasso from he's from Lyra Health in the US. He came over recently, and he's kind of short in stature, big in personality. We can confirm he is taller than Joelle.
He is.
Yeah, there you go, Joe.
Well, I'm glad we're not doing this in person, because that would be mortifying. I'm pretty sure I'd lose that contest.
Well, is anyone really a loser? I don't know. So, Christina, while we've got you, tell us about the Respect at Work Taskforce, please, starting with maybe why it was established.
Yeah, sure. We're actually the first Australian work health and safety regulator to set up a dedicated team focused on this harm, which is workplace sexual harassment and any other gender-based harmful behaviours at work. We've been around for a little bit over a year, and it really is in recognition of the fact that this is an incredibly prevalent and pervasive workplace harm, and it is a work health and safety issue. The task force really is helping SafeWork become a bit more of an active and visible regulator of this harm. And we're not just looking at regulatory responses. What we're really doing is using our advise and educative role as a regulator to set the expectation that businesses need to really step up to the plate and take proactive action to prevent this harm. and with the ultimate aim of protecting workers. You might notice our name, Respect at Work, comes from directly and is inspired by and is in response to the Australian Human Rights Commission's 2020 Respect at Work report. And there were a couple of key findings in there that really kind of gave the inspiration for the creation of our team. And that was that it was occurring at alarmingly high rates. At least almost 1 in 5 workers have experienced workplace sexual harassment in Australia. There was an urgent need to raise awareness. It is a work health and safety issue. It wasn't being treated per se like that. And that there was a real lack of preventative action. A lot of responses from workplaces were waiting for incidences and reports to occur, and not much early intervention or early preventative action was being taken. And so that's in a nutshell how we were created. It's not a new workplace harm. It's just not been seen in the work health and safety lens traditionally. And that's why our task force was established. I might just give a nod to the fact in October last year, we launched a 4-year strategic plan, which provides our 4 key strategic outcomes you want to achieve over the next 4 years in terms of regulating this harm, building capability within SafeWork, but also what we expect of duty holders. That strategy has been recognised by the International Labour Organization earlier this year. And it also, this general work is something that the New South Wales government has seen as a priority because it is seen as a barrier to women's economic participation in the workplace. They experience sexual harassment at higher rates than some other groups in the population. So it's really been seen as ensuring that workplaces are safer and that women can participate, and we can add, greater economic opportunities for women.
Yeah, definitely needed, as you say, and we'll get more into, I guess, why the focus on sexual harassment. I see SafeWork New South Wales, and we've had Ian Firth and Jim Kelly on the podcast previously. It just seems like what you guys are doing is always just a step ahead of most other states, and often SafeWork Australia as well. I mean, just in January, right, the SafeWork Australia dropped the model code of practice for sexual harassment and gender-based harassment, right? And you guys are already well on the way to doing something at a state level in this space, which is kudos to the innovation and trailblazing. I think SafeWork New South Wales have. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
We like to stoke some competition amongst the regulators. We think you guys are doing a good job, all the regulators. But yeah, New South Wales has got a lot of admiration for.
Sure. Sorry, you just you were being gratuitously complimentary there. So
well, we know that SafeWork New South Wales are going to review this recording. We want to make sure they.
You want to get the okay to publish it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I must say, personally, I can't take credit for it. Alex has been working on this issue prior to my starting, that's for sure. But I do. We probably should call out Victoria has had a broader government task force on this issue, and they are doing some extremely good work too. They haven't quite per se set up a task force or a team like this, but yeah, they're definitely someone we talk to pretty regularly. We want to understand how they're approaching this pretty complex harm. But yeah, I don't want to wear the badge of trailblazing quite yet without giving a nod to their work. They're great partners for us in this space.
That's an excellent response from a public servant.
And a lawyer.
And a lawyer.
Yep. I gave you that. Yep,
So why is SafeWork New South Wales focusing on sexual harassment specifically?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Look, it's been unlawful for over 30 years. Sexual harassment, whether it's in the workplace or outside. But obviously, with what the Human Rights Commission did, the Respect at Work report showing how widespread and pervasive it is, and that it's causing psychological and physical harm at work, and that emergence of psychosocial hazards and greater recognition of that within work health and safety regulators really was a natural point to say, okay, if this is occurring at alarming rates, it is in every industry at all levels, then this is something that we need to respond to as a regulator. And obviously it is occurring in workplaces despite the last 30-something years of work. You may have seen last year SafeWork New South Wales did their radar survey. I think they do that twice a year, every 6 months, and 1,000 respondents across Australia responded to that, and 1 in 5 said they experienced workplace sexual harassment. And that's very similar to the Human Rights Commission data as well. But it's still like that's 3 years after the Respect at Work report, and that's still a really high rate. So We are responding to emerging harms at work, even though I wouldn't characterize this as emerging per se, but we are showing that if this is occurring to workers and they're experiencing harm, then we need to be a responsible regulator and do something in this space. I also wanted to say that it really demonstrates that work health and safety regulators like SafeWork is really well placed because we do play a distinct role from other regulators like the police or the Fair Work Commission, and outcomes you can seek through the Australian Human Rights Commission, for example, and their complaints mechanism. We're the only regulator that looks at risks from a systemic level in the workplace, not necessarily the individual complaint or grievance between workers. We apply those work design principles, and we're the only ones that can apply a range of compliance and enforcement tools to uplift the kind of compliance with what we want to ensure in terms of health and safety at work. I might stop there. I'm happy to elaborate, but hopefully that gives you a good picture as to why we've decided to focus on this harm.
Yeah, I think I'm interested to understand, I guess, the differences in approach or how you will work with the Australian Human Rights Commission in particular, in relation to, I guess, the changes to the Sex Discrimination Act, and there is a lot of overlap there then between the Sex Discrimination Act and the WHS duties. I guess are there differences in approach and sort of in terms of what you would both cover as independent regulators?
Yeah, so we're definitely having those conversations with the Human Rights Commission. We always say that we've always had a positive duty under work health and safety. And the ultimate aims of both positive duties are to eliminate this risk from workplaces. But the thresholds expected by duty holders under the Sex Discrimination Act and the Work Health and Safety Act are different. Until that's kind of tested in court, can we really say that this is the key difference between the two? But we see them as complementary. We see them as uplifting workplaces to get rid of this harm and achieving this very similar goals. How in terms we approach our regulatory posture is something we are in discussions, but you'd hope for any regulator that we're coordinated, that we're using public funds the best way, that we are strategic in our approach. But definitely there are two regulators that have complementary obligations and expectations of employers in this space. And we are different to the Human Rights Commission in that we do have arguably stronger compliance and enforcement powers, including criminal sanctions, whereas the Human Rights Commission doesn't quite have that. We actually just released a 2-page explainer on the differences between us and the other positive duty. Happy to share that around, but that kind of articulates the key differences if you are a duty holder and you want to know, how do I comply with the Sex Discrimination Act? Do I meet both in complying with one? Yeah, answer some of those questions.
Yeah, fantastic. We can add a link to that in the show notes. So if listeners want to check that out, just have a look for that link.
Yeah, Joelle unpacked it in a webinar herself, but it'll be good to cross-reference with what the regulator in New South Wales is saying, not just the ex-regulator, Joelle. So, Christina, what are the main activities then of the task force?
Yeah, sure. So the strategic plan I mentioned that we launched in October sets out over the next 4 years our main activities. I'll let your listeners check that out, if they want to. But some of the key areas of focus is a lot of awareness raising and education as to what is this harm? Why is it a health and safety issue? What are some of the causes and drivers of this behaviour? What are some of the workplace factors? And then helping workplaces in our advice and education role as a regulator to assist them to take action, to prevent these harms from occurring. And then there's a big piece in our strategic plan about uplifting SafeWork's capability internally, getting our investigators trained, ensuring that we use the right tools, obviously as a regulator to achieve behavioural change in this area. The strategic plan calls out a couple of focus industries as well as high risk groups that we want to focus on. And they include accommodation and retail services, hospitality, and healthcare and social assistance. The reason why we picked those was not just prevalence data, how common we know they are in those industries. We also used workers' comp data, the number of matters that SafeWork is receiving, but we do also know underreporting is a massive issue. We also looked at the proportion of at-risk groups within those industries. And so we know that women, younger workers, LGBTQI workers, workers with a disability, and First Nations workers experience sexual harassment at higher rates than the rest of the population. So that's kind of where we are focusing our activities over the next couple of years. And we mentioned things in our strategy like we want to be underpinned by prevention-led approaches. We want to be collaborative. We want to speak to our stakeholders in this space. We know there is a whole body of knowledge and work outside of work health and safety, particularly in the human rights space, where they are dealing with broader violence against women, for example, and in the broader community, and also the voices of those with lived experience of sexual harassment. We know those have experienced or been impacted by it also have strong views as to how they think workplaces should address this harm. I think I mentioned briefly the causes and drivers. We really emphasize that in our approach because when we talk about taking a preventative approach, we really wanted to unpack what that meant. And did it mean tackling the root causes? Did it mean good early intervention responses? And we thought about all those things, and it is all those things. But we found that existing responses, a lot of it focused on just addressing the individual harmful behaviours that were occurring, or a report would occur and then you dealt with that incident, and then nothing systemic or forward-looking was implemented in the workplace as a result. So we drew on a lot of the research and data in this space, and also broad understanding of how psychosocial hazards cause harm at work. And we articulated some of these causes and drivers, and they include, workplaces that do have high hierarchies where power or decisions are concentrated, where there is gender inequality. That's probably the key driver, of course, where there's power disparity between genders, but also the harmful things like gender stereotypes and biases can play. We talk about just general poor workplace cultures where there is a culture of incivility or just general inappropriate conduct occurring. That can be a real risk setting for workplace sexual harassment. Barriers to reporting, or where remote or isolated work occurs, or where there's a culture of alcohol and drugs being used irresponsibly, and also male-dominated industries. I think what we're really trying to do is say greater recognition of these workplace factors, as complex as they are, will assist in designing and identifying what some of those control measures are so that we are taking a more preventative approach.
Yeah, and that'll be really interesting to our listeners, I think, Christina, because often when we look at things like sexual harassment, or at least historically, we've looked at that as the problem, the behavior is the problem, rather than going, well, actually, it's a symptom of like a larger systemic issue, right? And that's what the regulator's interested in shining a light on.
That's right. That's exactly it. And that's where I think we play that distinct role as a work health and safety regulator as opposed to other regulators.
Yeah. I know Joelle did some research with the offshore petroleum industry, and I think a transient workforce was another big risk factor when you've got people coming in and out and they're not necessarily, employed by the organisation, but maybe they're a contractor and they're maybe only on site for a couple of weeks at a time.
Yeah,
or something
so
like
a few kind of shutdown, turnaround, or tie-ins type projects.
Yeah. So I think a lot of those risk factors that you identified were things that you called out as well, but that was probably another one. It's worthwhile mentioning.
That's right. And goes back to work design and environment principles, right? If we know that we need that kind of cohort of workers and we need that to do the work, but then what are the risks in designing work that way?
Yeah. So, Christina, then what's SafeWork New South Wales' approach to regulating workplace sexual harassment? Is there anything in addition you'd add to that?
Other than the prevention focus that we've said, we are obviously a resource constrained regulator, so we do have to take a risk-based approach, and that's when we're driven by that data and evidence about where is it occurring in workplaces at a higher rate than others, or where is there a higher risk of it occurring, and I think that's going to cement our approach. We also know, because it's a relatively new area of focus for work health and safety, we have a huge piece to play in awareness raising and understanding, what some of those workplace factors we said are, and raising awareness as to how would you apply your work health and safety principles as you've always been doing to a harm like this.
Yeah, I think that risk-based approach that you're taking would resonate again with a number of listeners and clients of ours. Sometimes if you do a global survey or risk assessment across a population of workers, then they're like, how are we going to action something for every single team? And our advice is, well, you don't need to action something for every single team, at least not initially. You take a risk-based approach, work out where your higher areas of risk are and focus on them first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree. And workers are really good on giving you ideas for what some of the control measures are. They're great at identifying risk, but also giving you what some of the solutions they think are. And I think that's lacking in this space because it is a really emotive and complex harm as well and topic.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because we want to consult, like you say, workers understand their job and their context better than anyone else. So you want to get their experience, but like you say, it's probably more emotive a topic, and people are more impacted on potentially.
Yeah, and I think these types of behavior, I guess it's really easy to focus on the behavior of an individual in these types of cases rather than look at or try to understand what might be the drivers that are sitting behind that behavior.
Yeah, particularly if you're doing it reactively, right, in response to a complaint.
Yeah, but even from like an individual worker level, if you're seeing that kind of behavior, you're maybe not necessarily having as sound an understanding of what are those sort of broader organizational factors that are sort of contributing to an environment where somebody feels like they can engage in that behavior, for example.
Yep. And that's really then a piece for leaders. Like leaders
Definitely.
really, need to step up then and look at a more broader strategic approach.
So Alex, let's chat to you for a bit. So is the approach to regulating workplace sexual harassment different to the broader inspectorate work being done at SafeWork?
So the approach is probably similar. I guess we all inspectors have a foundational skill set, but I guess where my team differs is that we have a more specialized insight into the drivers and all the things we've been speaking about today, the organizational systems. And I think our role has really been initially over the last 12 months to build that uplift, that knowledge uplift for our inspectorate. The approach is similar, but where we differ, I suppose, is the challenges with the understanding some of the topics we've spoken about today, like power imbalances and hierarchy and the culture in the workplace and how that can drive that the behavioral elements, which is what people commonly focus on. And it's also, I guess, it's complex and different in the sense that the workers that we interact with have sustained trauma. They have sustained, complex psychological injury. And as you know, in addressing mental health, you've got a mental health continuum. There are different types of recovery, and people recover at different rates, and they're all on a different journey. So that could be complex for us in navigating, I guess, statutory timeframes, in making sure that the worker is, treated respectfully. We have a trauma-informed approach. So, yeah, I'd like to think we're unique. We're a little bit of a unicorn in that space.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, I think it's probably consistent with what I was doing when I was with the regulator as well. It's about kind of what are our standard inspection processes, I guess, in terms of the approach to inspection and the way that things like I guess sampling of data sources and that, I guess the approach, but then some of the skill set or the the knowledge about theory and models and that sort of thing would need to be a bit more specialized, I would expect.
Yeah, I think the general approach, inspectors we have an initial approach with workers that come to us, or people that are contacting us on their behalf. We also work with a team of investigators who have a slightly different skill set, I suppose, a little. Well, potentially, I guess, more focused on investigative in determining did something happen or not happen, whereas our focus is to really look at that evidence collection beforehand, the systems approach, what was happening that led up to a particular incident. So yeah, I think having an understanding of the various theories behind all of this is definitely helpful. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think as a novel approach for safe work, again, it's a step up in the right direction for supporting our inspectorate to broaden, I guess, their expertise in this space.
Yeah, and are you doing proactive inspections, or are you kind of just focused on responding to reports at this stage?
So a bit of both. So we, as Christina mentioned earlier, we've got focus industries. So obviously we will have proactive compliance programs in that space. But in the last 12 months, my team have been responding to some very serious and distressing matters, but having a great impact. We have education at every workplace inspection. I think every time you meet an inspector, you're going to get a piece of education, probably whether you like it or not. And so we're issuing improvement notices. We're seeing inspectors outside our team who would traditionally not touch this matter issuing improvement notices. So be it construction or be it, our generalist inspectorate, we are seeing a real shift in our approach. So baby steps for some, but certainly for us, even those baby steps are really huge for us. It's a challenging topic.
Yeah, I can definitely see having an inspector from outside of your team feeling confident enough to actually issue an improvement notice is definitely I wouldn't classify that as a baby step. I'd say that's a pretty big step.
Yeah, it's yeah.
I was going to say it all comes down to state of knowledge, right? And people becoming really comfortable, I guess, with what is expected and how can that be demonstrated. Which actually brings us
Oh,
to my next question, actually, Alex, which you're probably going to refer to, which is what does compliance look like then, right? If it's really clear that a generalist inspector actually understands what compliance looks like and can issue a notice of improvement where they don't meet what is required of the PCBU. So what does compliance look like?
So I don't know how much time we've got left, but let's see. I'll give it a crack. So I'll start with what compliance doesn't look like, because for me, what we're seeing in this space is very similar to workplace bullying a number of years ago, and for some businesses are probably still doing it today, but it's the policy. I have a policy, bad person, don't do bad thing, and everything will be all right. And as you've already mentioned as well, the other focus that businesses tend to take is we will remove bad person from workplace, and then everything is perfect. We carry on. So compliance does not look like that. So I would really like to see a shift in that, and we're seeing a little bit. But I think what we'd like to see, particularly for sexual harassment, no different to other psychosocial hazards, is that focus on work design, is that focus on consulting with your workers and asking them, are you experiencing this? Are you, how should we address this in the workplace? Having that open dialogue. I think we've got the Model Act, we've got regulation now. So that's been in place for us anyway, since October 2022. And it gives you quite a prescriptive list. It includes a number of factors to consider. So we'd like to see workplaces going, okay, it's not just sexual harassment. There are other factors. There are other psychosocial hazards that accompany sexual harassment, and there are lots of drivers that we've spoken about already today. We'd like to see workplaces actually addressing that. So if an inspector from SafeWork New South Wales came to a New South Wales workplace and we had a conversation about what are you doing to manage or eliminate, preferably, sexual harassment in the workplace, and a workplace hasn't looked at our regulation, then that would be concerning. But that's an opportunity for improvement. So we would work with them to, we'd issue an improvement notice potentially, and depending on the seriousness of the matter, we may consider whether we need to work with our investigator friends at SafeWork. But ignoring, I think, the legislation, which is also packaged with our fabulous psychosocial code for managing psychosocial hazards at work, I think we've got the perfect trifecta now to address compliance. That's what compliance looks like to me.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you clarified what compliance doesn't look like, because I still see a lot of confusion with people going, we've got a policy, or, we removed, like you said, a bad person who did a bad thing and now we're all good, without actually looking at opportunities to improve the system to prevent similar occurrences.
Absolutely, and I think it's quite clear that I think it's quite practicable to identify the hazard. It's as simple as having potentially a conversation, but with psychosocial hazards, you can run an anonymous process, if you like, and look at those themes. Consultation is quite clear in our work health and safety legislation. There's a whole chapter, and it's there for a reason, to make sure that there is dialogue. Workers should have a say in how these control measures are implemented. So I think it's not as hard as I think workplaces might think. Certainly easier for larger business where they've got more resources. Might be more difficult for smaller business where workers are probably more under a microscope, I suppose, if you like, because everyone can see everybody. But I think the steps to take now are much clearer than they have been, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years ago. I think we've come a long way.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I'm interested in, and probably many of our listeners would be as well, is in your target industries, for example. You're going to have interaction not just with colleagues, but with customers and other people in the community. And it may be impossible for a PCBU to eliminate the sexual harassment from occurring. So there is a requirement then, if you can't eliminate, to reduce risk to as low as reasonably practicable. So interested to hear from you, Alex. What does reasonably practicable look like when it comes to sexual harassment prevention?
Well, I think reasonably practicable is all those steps I think that I mentioned just before around identifying those risks. Um, it can be challenging to eliminate psychosocial hazards, but you've got to start. Any good prevention measure or approach is going to start with identifying, and many workplaces are ignoring the fact that this is even a hazard in their workplace. Acceptance that sexual harassment is a work health and safety hazard under our laws is, yeah, I think we're getting some traction there, and that's part of our, I guess, remit with our workplace, our strategy for New South Wales. But I think, so what's reasonably practicable for a small business is going to be probably a little bit more challenging than a large business, as I said earlier. But identification, consultation with your workers, not relying on things like EAP. Having a safe space for reporting. Reporting is really important for a worker for sexual harassment, any hazard, but especially for sexual harassment. Being able to even report anonymously, making sure that your information is confidential. That's, I think, reasonably practicable. But yeah, there are still some challenges for lots of businesses in lots of different of those elements that I've mentioned. It can be
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, yeah. I agree, right? And like you say, some people just either refuse to attribute it as a hazard or acknowledge it as a hazard, or they go, it's too hard, so we're not going to do anything about it, right? So it's it's good to see examples come out of what companies can do. So it'll be great to see some practical examples shared of more systemic controls.
Absolutely, and I think we're starting to see lots of case law across, Australia. There's the Fair Work Commission. There's learnings in lots of different regulatory spaces. So it's about taking those messages and converting them into practical application. And I think workplaces should consider just giving their regulator a call, having a conversation about being proactive, being on the front foot rather than being fearful of a regulator. I think lots of workplaces overlook that we provide loads of education. We see a lot of things that people shouldn't be doing, but we can also encourage in the right direction of things that they should be doing. So I'd say reach out. We've, lots of information on our website, for example, and we're seeing information coming out every day, just as the Safe Work Australia model code was released recently. So I would say reach out. We're not that scary.
Yeah, no, we've met Ian and Jim and Anna from SafeWork New South Wales. They're all beautiful people. So we can concur with that.
Not scary at all.
No, absolutely not. And have you seen the size of Christina? She's tiny. Like she couldn't hurt a fly. So what outcomes besides education, because you referenced that already, Alex, could a employer expect from a SafeWork New South Wales visit?
So typically what we'll see, the outcome is generally something, could be, it depends again on risk and what we're seeing, but it would generally land somewhere with like an improvement notice where we issue information to, or a direction to make some changes at the workplace. We negotiate a time period to, and we always ask that it is done in consultation with the workforce. So an improvement notice is one option. To a lesser extent, prohibition notices, that really depends on your evidence collection. And again, people start to talk about that and they start to talk about prohibition notices looking at someone's behaviour rather than the broader factors. So, and then obviously for the serious, where there is a serious risk of harm, or we know that an incident has occurred, then we do have the option to refer that to our investigator section of SafeWork. And I guess prosecution is the end game, or possible end game from, end result from that that pathway. But there are many steps to take before we reach that, but there's always room for improvement.
Has SafeWork New South Wales ever issued an enforceable undertaking that is public domain in this area?
For sexual harassment? No.
The enforceable undertakings are a great source of information for the types of things that businesses could be doing to address different types of hazards. So
absolutely, and shout out to Western Australia, who have got a really good enforceable undertaking and making some change there in the mining sector.
Yes, we've seen that one.
Yeah, lots of work to be done in the mining sector in WA. All right, so back over to you, Christina. So in terms of publicly available outputs from the task force, will they be produced in terms of like data, trends and learnings coming out of these types of activities?
Yes, there will be, I'd say, differences in approaches, and that very much stems from the different legal frameworks in which our powers as regulators derive. The positive duty under the Sex Discrimination Act, regulated by the Australian Human Rights Commission, very much has as its core objective gender equality, and that's not just in the workplace but also more broadly. Whereas the work health and safety framework is in relation to eliminating or mitigating risks to work health and safety so far as reasonably practicable, as you know. And that relates to any risks, whether that be physical or psychosocial, such as workplace sexual harassment. So they will drive, I think, the different regulatory approaches, but we also know that they are complementary. We have started speaking to the Human Rights Commission. We know that the Human Rights Commission have called out mining, retail and legal industries in relation to this issue. We, in our SafeWork New South Wales 4-year strategic plan released last year, have called out retail, hospitality and healthcare, but we also recognise that this workplace harm occurs across all industries and at all levels. So I think that will underpin our approach. I'm sure we'll all be driven by data and evidence in consultation with people with lived experience of workplace sexual harassment, and seeing where workers are at risk of most harm. We've just actually released a 2-page explainer on this on the SafeWork New South Wales website about the differences between the positive duties, if any of your listeners would like to see that.
So, Christina, at this point in the podcast, we like to get people to think about the future. So the strategy goes for 4 years. So in 2027, what are your hopes for what that looks like in this space?
Sure. 4 years isn't that long, is it? It sounds long, but I'll be ambitious. I think I've said a lot about that prevention approach, and that really is a big uptake in coherence and understanding of what drives this behaviour, so we actually can take some action to prevent it. We know underreporting is a massive issue, so I think in the next 4 years we're going to see actually an increase in reporting, which doesn't necessarily mean an increase in incidences per se. It could, but it may mean that organisations and workplaces and regulators like us are going to see an uptick in those reports because people are feeling more comfortable to report. And I hope things like what Alex has said about taking a trauma-informed and person-centred approach, that empathetic approach that still holds true to our independence as a regulator, can be implemented as well. And dispelling some of the myths. One of the drivers of this behaviour, we didn't say it earlier, but it's something that's out in some of the literature, is backlash and resistance. Not only from the alleged harassers, but also other workers that may be impacted by this, because it is a broader societal and community issue. So we hope that some of the myths about this harm and how it plays out in workplaces and the impact it has on people can be dispelled, and we can talk about it in a more systemic way and using the work health and safety approach. I'd love to see that in the next 4 years.
Like you say, it's going to come up quick. So hopefully we see some of those things start to come through soon.
Yeah.
And Alex, do you have any words of advice for listeners who are interested in working in the field of psychological health and safety?
Oh, look, I think I found it very rewarding. I think I've had the opportunity to do lots of different things at SafeWork New South Wales. I've been in investigations. I've been, in a psychological health and safety team, and now at Respect at Work, and lots of other things. And the psych space is it's challenging, but it's exciting to work in because there's such opportunity to make that difference. There are so many workers that don't have a voice, and I often like to say that working in this field helps people have that voice that they sometimes wouldn't be able to have in their own workplace. So I'd say get on board. Sign up. There's legislation to support, there's supporting documentation and guidance to support. There's a whole community of the likes of yourselves, our regulator friends, and others who are really challenging, the bygone era where psychological health and safety was buried under the front doorstep at the workplace. So now it's spoken about. We are reducing stigma to talk about it. So I would encourage to join up, and it's a rewarding experience, I think. Challenging but rewarding.
Yep, and obviously we agree with that statement as well. Challenging and rewarding.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. And like you say, there's a big and growing community in this space as well. So you'll have lots of similarly minded colleagues and peers to talk to.
That's right. Lots of people to learn with and from.
Alex and Christina, it's been a real pleasure having you both on the podcast today and talking about a really great topic of conversation and something that is definitely in need of regulation, given, like you say, this has been around for 30 years in terms of a work requirement, but we're still seeing too high a prevalence of sexual harassment in the workplace. So really looking forward to seeing the work of SafeWork New South Wales and the other regulators around Australia in this space and see the positive change that can be made. So thanks for coming along and sharing.
Thanks for having us. Nice to meet you.
All right, guys. Well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Remember, we do video these when we have our guests on, and you can catch those videos on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. We also take snippets, some of the best bits from these conversations that we have. Sometimes it's hard to choose, and you'll find them on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page. While you're over on LinkedIn, you'll also find Joelle and myself. So if you want to continue the conversation with us, you'll find that Christina and Alex are pretty friendly too. So like all the regulators there at SafeWork New South Wales, I'm sure they'll be open to continuing the conversation via that medium. So that's it for today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.